Hello and welcome to the Shaw Local Bears Insider Podcast. I'm Shaw Local Bears beat reporter Sean Hammond. Joining me, as always, is Shaw Local's very own Michael Dwojak. We are live. It is Thursday, August 22nd. If you're joining us after the fact, we're recording this before the final preseason game against the Chiefs. Caleb Williams' preseason is over. He will not play tonight. We saw him play an entire half against the Bengals on Saturday. And he and most of the starters are going to sit out Thursday night against the Chiefs. Michael, what are your big picture takeaways from the 42 preseason snaps of Caleb Williams action that we saw?
I'm going to sound like a broken record, but progress, right? Like, I feel like you're seeing progress throughout this entire camp. Like, I feel like at the beginning of it, it was kind of like, he looks like a rookie quarterback. He's still trying to figure things out. He's going against a top 10 defense, and he looked like a rookie quarterback. And even we'll talk a little bit more, but the Bengals game on Saturday, I feel like was a great example of that, where Knox, maybe there was some communication issues and something like that in the first quarter. Maybe that's why the offense looked a little stagnant. But the offense didn't look good in the first quarter, and then Caleb kind of figured things out, kind of worked through some things, and he looked better. So I think you kind of saw that progress, the progress you wanted to see. You saw glimpses of, him running the ball well. You saw him make incredible passes. You made him make some good decisions. And you also saw him just, make mistakes, which is what you want to see from a rookie quarterback. You want to have him grow and figure things out along the way. So, I don't know if you can go with, an A+ would probably be, he never missed a pass and everything was fantastic. And, for sure that he's the next Patrick Mahomes. But if you're grading from what you can take from the preseason, which we'll talk a little bit more, but, there's a certain amount you can take when it is preseason tape that you're putting out there. But, if you look at what he did over the preseason, I think Bears fans should be encouraged. And I think you've seen a lot of Bears fans kind of, drinking the Kool-Aid, and they're all ready to go once the Bears start things off against the Titans in a couple weeks.
There's obviously reasons to be excited. You saw some glimpses, some flashes that are really, really exciting. We saw the off-platform, the way he's able to scramble and whether he's going to run or throw. And even when he did run for that touchdown against Cincinnati, his first instinct is always to throw. You see him scramble out of trouble and he looks up to try to find a target. And that's sort of the total 180 opposite of what the previous quarterback used to do. And that's why the Bears like him. That's one of the big reasons. That's why he had so much success in college at USC and Oklahoma and won the Heisman Trophy. If you're watching live with us on YouTube, do us a favor and hit the thumbs up. That's a great way to support the show. If you're listening after the fact, if you're listening on Spotify or Apple, be sure to follow and subscribe to our show. Leave us a review. We would really appreciate that. These are great ways to support the show. Also, be sure to head to shawlocal.com for all of our Bears coverage. Thank you to everyone who's joining us live, as always. Keep an eye on our Twitter pages if you're listening after the fact and you want to join the conversation. We're always letting you guys know on Twitter or on X, whatever it's called these days, ahead of time. Follow Bears_Insider. You can follow us each individually as well. We are going to hit some of your Bears questions. So leave some Bears questions in the comments. We're going to get to you. But yeah, big picture, Caleb Williams played well in his 2 preseason games. I did think it was interesting that on that Hard Knocks episode, we saw all the communication issues that they seemed to be having those first 3 drives when they went 3 and out 3 straight times. And, nobody mentioned that after the game. And I think that was that had obviously it seemed like from what we saw in Hard Knocks that they were able to get the plays in, even though it was a little harder than usual. But that seemed like something that I'm a little surprised nobody mentioned.
Yeah, I thought that was interesting. And I was curious to see whether, obviously the Bears knew it was going to air in Hard Knocks because, they have final say in what airs in each episode. But it was interesting just to kind of see, their vantage point of, they're not doing it on purpose, but this is something that can happen, in a game. Like, you could lose communication and that sort of stuff. And, how much that really played a factor in him missing, his targets. I don't know that much. Obviously you set the play, you said it was going to happen. So you knew what the play was going to be. And that the miscommunication maybe played a little bit of a factor there. But it was interesting that no one said that, and it was interesting that no one really hinted on that until we found that out on Tuesday. Something I wanted to hit on, kind of going back to our original point, Sean, was you mentioned the comparison between Justin Fields and him like wanting to look to pass as opposed to run like Fields.
Yeah.
Doesn't that feel like something that the elite quarterbacks do in this league? Patrick Mahomes does it well. I know Joe Burrow doesn't run the ball per se, but like he's still looking to pass, and I feel like that's sort of what you kind of want to see from Caleb if he's going to be successful. It's against preseason number 2s and 3s and that kind of stuff, so you want to take that with a grain of salt, but I feel like that has to be really encouraging just to kind of see a quarterback who is always pass first, but then, knows when to scramble, when to run for it, and will give you 5 or 10 yards. And I think that has to be the biggest encouraging thing, where with Trubisky, even, maybe he kind of looked a little bit to pass longer than Fields did, but Fields had his head down as soon as, he saw any sort of pressure. And I feel like that has to be like key for Bears fans to be excited about Williams, where it's just like, he's always going to look to pass. He's always going to look to make the play. And that has to have you encouraged to kind of see that, he has those traits that a Mahomes has and, other, young elite quarterbacks have.
Yeah, it's another example of just the way that he's studied Aaron Rodgers and Patrick Mahomes. You can see he references Rodgers a lot, but you can see that he's studied Mahomes too in over the years. And I mean, Patrick Mahomes is not somebody who anybody would call fast necessarily. Sometimes when he runs, it almost seems like it's in slow motion. But the fact is, I mean, he runs for 300 plus yards every single season with a couple of touchdowns, rushing touchdowns here and there. And so like, it's not like he can't do it, but at the same time, yeah, you're absolutely right. Like Mahomes is a guy who's always keeping his eyes downfield. He's always going to be looking for a target. However a play breaks down, like that is his main objective. And you saw that with Caleb in just that little clip where he ran for that touchdown. You could see him looking for a target before he realized, oh my gosh, there's nothing but green grass ahead of me. Maybe I should just run this thing. And I think you see that too in the deep ball to Rome, the 45-yarder. I mean, that was a heck of a throw. The touchdown run was obviously really impressive. I think that throw to Rome is maybe the highlight of the preseason for Caleb. Like the level of difficulty on that toss, running to your left, the way he torques his upper body to get that throw basically off one foot. You don't see a lot of rookies doing that.
No, and even like, a lot was made about that play, but I also think the pass interference play that kind of happened earlier in the game too, just being able to make that pass, being so close to getting it to happen. And those aren't plays that you kind of saw, from quarterbacks, in Bears pass, maybe Jay Cutler and that sort of stuff. But, that's a pass that usually resulted in in an incompletion, maybe, maybe somewhere that's kind of underthrown or overthrown. But that was a ball that, Caleb placed perfectly and kind of set up Rome either to catch the ball or to set up a pass interference play. And I feel like that play even kind of helps illustrate that, Caleb obviously has the talent. He has the physical talent to make, crazy throws to like a Dunze to like Kmet that we saw a couple weeks ago against the Bills. But he also has the smarts to, he sees an advantage. He knows that Rome or Keenan or DJ can make a play on the ball, and he's going to place it most of the time perfectly in order for them to either make the play or draw a penalty and move the ball down the field.
So, we're at the end of the preseason here. I know we got one more game against Kansas City. It's going to be mostly the backups, mostly the guys at the back end of the roster. And I do want to talk about those guys. But big picture, like looking at QB1 at Caleb Williams and this first team offense. I mean, how worried should we be? The preseason can lie. The preseason does not always. The teams that go undefeated in the preseason aren't always the teams that are the best teams in the regular season. And so I guess my question is like, how concerned should we be that while, everything seems to be trending the right direction, everything's very positive right now, is it a house of cards? Like what is our concern level for where this team is at, or are we not that concerned? I mean, I would say, and I can kick it off too. I mean, like we said with Caleb, like the glimpses are there, and you see them a lot more quickly. I think, it's hard to remember Justin Fields' first preseason. I haven't gone back and watched those. I mostly don't want to go back and watch preseason games. But I mean, the flashes that we're seeing from Caleb, I don't think we were seeing quite the same level of that from Justin a couple of years ago. So that's exciting. I think, we know that Caleb can play within structure, within the pocket. He did that a lot more in college than people give him credit for. But obviously the 3 straight 3-and-outs is a little concerning to start that game. I think it's fair to have a little bit of cautiousness as you go into this season.
Sure. And I think that's the biggest thing, right? Like obviously I know, Bears fans want to drink the Kool-Aid. They see the good plays and that kind of stuff. But, Justin Fields had great plays. He had good throws. He had long runs, obviously. And, that doesn't mean that I'm comparing, Caleb to Justin by any means. But we've seen glimpses before, for the past however long the NFL has been going on with preseasons. Like, there have been preseason heroes, who've done a great job, training camp legends
Right.
who haven't made the roster or just like kind of flamed out. Like, it's hard to get a good grasp of things. And I don't think we'll truly get a good grasp of things until, the middle of October. Like the regular season has now kind of become, September is kind of a month where teams are still figuring things out, trying to get their legs under them, trying to get those calluses and that kind of stuff, trying to get back into football shape since since the training camp has really changed from what it used to be. So, I think September will still be a lot of learning lessons. I think there'll be a lot of stalled drives. I think we'll see a lot of the first quarter, and I think we'll see a lot of the second quarter. I think that's just something that Bears fans need to be prepared for, where there's good stuff on the horizon and you can see the hope, but at the same time, I can see September being a month of a lot of frustration where Bears fans are like, well, there are multiple interceptions. There are, more interceptions than touchdowns right now and that sort of stuff. And that's just going to happen with the rookie quarterback, consistently going against ones as opposed to, what you see in the preseason where Caleb mostly played against twos, sometimes ones against the Bills.
Yeah, I want to bring up this stat that I read from Michal Kapadia over at The Ringer, looking at rookie quarterbacks. And obviously we're all like, we've all seen what Caleb has done in this preseason. I think everybody is across, everybody who covers the league, everybody who follows the league was pretty certain that this guy was the clear, obvious choice with the number 1 overall pick. But at the same time, looking at Michal Kapadia at The Ringer, looked at the past 10 seasons, 36 rookie quarterbacks have played at least 200 dropbacks. And the average performance in terms of EPA per play, they averaged over that course, they were the 26th best NFL quarterback. So, obviously that means there's quarterbacks who are in the high 20s and maybe
Right.
in the late teens or whatever. There's also guys who are going to be in the 30s. It's going to be all over that range. But I think it's fair to be excited, and it's also important to remember that doesn't mean that Caleb is going to be a top 10 quarterback right away. And that is, maybe most fans aren't thinking that, and maybe I don't even have to say that. But at the same time, I think it's important to remember that these guys are going to go through some learning curves. Even the best rookies do that. Even a guy like Caleb Williams, who went number 1 overall, because CJ Stroud was really an outlier last year. That does not happen. That was the best rookie season probably in 10 years. Maybe Andrew Luck. I don't know exactly. I don't have the numbers on that in front of me. But my point is, this is going to be a fun season. I'm not saying that I'm not trying to put a damper on things. I'm just saying, look at it big picture. Look at it with the lens that this guy's going to be good, but it might take a little time.
Yeah, and I kind of think that kind of goes to the point of what a lot of people, this week I know Tom Brady came out and he came up with his, comments about, going through the system and kind of, all these quarterbacks are starting from day one and that sort of stuff. And, you don't get really the time to, figure things out. And I think the biggest thing a lot of people took from that or, argued against that was every quarterback is different. Every quarterback, there have been quarterbacks who started from day one and succeeded. There have been those who haven't. There have been those who sat down, those and succeeded, and those who, sat and never really put it together. So I think it goes back to, probably a very dumb moment. Like, every quarterback is different. Caleb's development is going to be different from Stroud's. Is going to be different for Patrick Mahomes. Is going to be different from Justin Fields and Mitch Trubisky, right? So I think that's the biggest thing to kind of take from it. And when you're kind of looking forward to September and realizing, Caleb will throw a couple interceptions, and that doesn't mean he's a bust. Caleb will throw 3 touchdowns in a game, and that doesn't mean that he's the next Patrick Mahomes. You got to find the balance. And I know a lot of social media is, the extremes, and you're just kind of like, oh, like, this is what people are thinking because this is what people are tweeting or posting. But in reality, I think we're somewhere in the middle where most Bears fans are like, he's going to look good. He's going to look bad. He's a rookie quarterback. But, man, I really hope he looks good because I really want to get excited finally for a Bears quarterback.
Yeah, and look, Bears fans should be excited. This was an exciting preseason. I know we got one more game tonight. Unfortunately, we're not going to see Caleb and the starters for 20 days here, 21. I don't know what the math is on that. September 8th against the Tennessee Titans at Soldier Field. That's going to be the season opener. They're going to work hard to make sure that they're not rusty, that they're staying on top of it. Even just in practice. Before we get to those guys on the back end of the roster, I want to talk 53-man roster, but I also. I see some guys in the comments talking about the defense. Michael, what were your? We saw in Hard Knocks that the Bears were in on Matthew Judon. What does that tell you? What was your takeaway from those conversations that we got a glimpse at on the show?
I think you learned a couple things in that scene, and I thought it was really interesting because it kind of contradicted what the reporting was out there because the Bears did go to a 3rd round pick and. We're willing to, trade for him as long as, Judon signed an extension. And obviously he didn't, and the trade didn't come through. The first thing was that the Bears have been active. I think that's obviously, I think that's been obvious that the Bears, thought that Judon, even at his, older age, which is funny for me to say because I think we're the same age or he's like a year younger than me. But I think Poles saw a guy that he was willing to make an investment in. He had the pick. And he was willing to do it, and it didn't happen. And I don't think that necessarily means that the Bears are desperate to bring in talent. I think they saw an opportunity. It didn't work out. That doesn't mean I think that they're going to, trade for, another top, defensive end or anything like that. I think it was more of a style fit. And does that mean that the Bears are probably in, if there are some, cuts and that kind of stuff are still on Yannick Ngakoue? Yeah, they might still be, but I still, it felt like more of a fit thing as opposed to being like the Bears are desperate to add a rusher into the system. And then the other thing I kind of think we've seen throughout this offseason is how different Ryan Poles is from Ryan Pace, where I feel like with Ryan Pace, it would be like, do whatever you want. Like, we won't sign a contract extension. We'll give you whatever you want. I want to get my guy. Where it's very clear that, in the in this trade, or whether it's like whether the Bears where Poles had to kind of be held back from trading up for Rome Odunze, the Bears have a system. They have their guardrails, like he said, and they know what they're going to do, and they're not going to go beyond it. And I think that shows how disciplined Poles is, where he's not afraid to make a trade. He's not afraid to go for Claypool. He's not afraid to trade for Fleck. But at the same time, he's not going to set the Bears back because he really likes a player if it goes beyond their preset definition. And I think that has to be a really big thing for Bears fans, where it seems like Ryan Poles is, constrained in what he's going to do. I don't know if constrained is the right word, but, he knows what he's going to do. He knows what the limits are, and he's willing to do it. And I think that's kind of a really big thing for Bears fans when it comes to future decisions, whether it's contract extensions, trades, that kind of stuff.
Yeah, they're clearly still looking to patch some things up. They're maybe that's not the right framing of that. They're looking to add talent at certain spots, and defensive end is definitely one of them. If any big pass rusher becomes available, I think, of course, Ryan Poles is going to be on the phone. He knows that's maybe the weakest spot on his roster. at the top, obviously Montez Sweat's really, really good. But in terms of like the total depth, that might be a spot where they want to get better. And you've seen some nice things from Austin Booker, from Daniel Hardy. They still have Dominique Robinson down there on the roster. And yeah, I think, I think the Matthew Judon situation is unique also, because you're talking about a guy he just turned 32 years old a couple of days ago, which in NFL terms is not young.
Right.
But usually when you're talking about trading a Pro Bowl player, they always want the extension. I mean, most players are going to say that they want the deal. They're not going to turn down money, and that makes me think. With Judon specifically, a guy who was injured last year, he only played 4 games, but he had a couple of huge seasons right before that, 4 straight Pro Bowl appearances. I mean, this guy is probably thinking of like a Von Miller type deal. If he stays healthy and has a really good year, he could be getting the 6-year, $100+ million deal that Von Miller got from the Bills or something like that. And
Right.
Certainly I don't think the Falcons and I don't think the Bears were willing to go there. That's just kind of speculation on my part. But you're talking about a guy who's in the last year of his deal. It's surprising to hear that he doesn't want to sign something now, if that's what it came down to for the Bears on Ryan Poles' side. But that just tells me that he's got pretty high expectations for himself.
Yeah, and I think that's fine. Obviously, that worked for Jalen Johnson last year. He had high expectations heading in his final year. And, a player is going to bet on themselves, and they really want to take an opportunity. If there's more money on the table to be had, if you play better, you're going to take that opportunity. And, obviously the Falcons were fine with that. And they were like, all right, like, we'll see how it goes. And the Bears weren't. And, it's like Ryan Poles says, if he has 26 at the end of the season, he's going to be sick to his stomach. But that's just how it goes. You sometimes take a gamble on the player. Sometimes it works. Sometimes it doesn't. That's pretty much, just all of sports. Sometimes your gamble works. Sometimes it doesn't. You're going to make some mistakes and some misses.
Sports Chicago style chiming in here says Ian Cunningham also seems like a steadying factor for Poles. Yeah, definitely. You look back at the clips we saw from the draft when, Ryan was saying, maybe I should call the Falcons about Rome. And Ian was the more skeptical one, saying, hold your horses there. Let's see what shakes out. And obviously nobody expected the Falcons to do what they did and take Michael Penix. But yeah, I mean, these are group decisions at the end of the day. I do think that's an interesting thing watching Hard Knocks too, is seeing the conversations with Ian, the conversations with Trey Koziel, who's another one of the higher ups there. Ryan Poles doesn't make any of these decisions alone. He's surrounded himself with people he trusts, and that's a big factor in this too. Michael, we got a game tonight. We're not going to see Caleb. Not going to see Caleb Williams or most of the starters. I don't know what that means. Matty Eberflus left it at that. We could see a couple of guys. I don't know. I mean, Jaquan Brisker hasn't played a preseason snap. I don't know if he's a guy who might need even just a series. That's just kind of me guessing. I don't know what starters will play, but maybe it won't be any of them. But in terms of like the guys on the second string, the guys towards the end of the roster, who are you watching tonight? What are you getting excited about as you watch Bears Chiefs? By the way, the Chiefs are also not playing their starters.
I think it probably has to be both of the lines, right? I feel like you have to look at, primarily the defensive line is just trying to figure out, what are the rotations going to be and who's going to, make this roster. Obviously, Sweat is on the roster, Dexter, Billings, those guys are on the roster, DeMarcus Walker. But can, Hardy continue his really impressive training camp? I feel like he's kind of been like the guy that's kind of, stepped into the fray. Obviously, Austin Booker is a safe bet. Can he continue, his strong preseason? And is he even going to play, I guess? Would you consider him a starter? I'm not sure. But, I think you have some really interesting decisions to make on the line where, Dominique Robinson, Hardy, how many, linemen do you keep? But I think that'll be really interesting just to kind of see how that plays out and just to see what the rotations are, who's going to be kind of in, who's going to be out. So I think that, and I think, on the offensive line stuff, you talked about who's going to be a starter. Honestly, I would play the offensive line if I was the Bears, just based on I don't think you've gotten so much continuity out of that group so far. They still got to figure some things out. Obviously, Nate Davis has been back, but he still needs some reps. I know you got some injuries there too. Kieran Amagaji's back. Obviously, he wasn't going to be a starter, but you want to get him some, as many reps as possible.
Yeah, good point.
To come in during injuries happen on the line pretty quickly, so you need to have, him pretty ready or as close to ready as he can get. So, I would be playing him as well, but the offensive line is really interesting to me just because I feel like they need some reps, and that honestly is kind of a concern for me when it comes to this offense where they've had reps, they've kind of got things in, but I feel like I still want to see more from a line that still needs to get more cohesive.
Yeah. Ryan Bates has been out.
Right.
He's still out this week, so he's not going to play. They've had the same starting five we saw against Cincinnati in practice this week. So that I would imagine none of those guys are going to play, but you're right. I mean, Matt Eberflus said most of the starters won't play. Maybe they do want to see Coleman Shelton or Nate Davis or one of those guys. I'd be a little surprised. But yeah, like Karan's an interesting one because he's literally just got back from his injury this week. I lean towards they might just be cautious with that and not play him in this game. But it's hard to say on that one. I mean, he's a rookie. Obviously, the preseason's so big for rookies because you can actually, you don't want to go in. Ideally, Karan's first snap in an NFL regular season won't be like his when he's in there in the regular season.
Right.
You'd want to get him a couple of reps. Matt Pryor is a guy who played pretty well a couple of weeks ago in Buffalo. I imagine we'll see him tonight. And some of those guys, on the bubble, you're talking about Jatiri Carter and Bill Murray and Doug Kramer. This is a big game for those guys. They're probably on the outside looking in. I'm gonna do I'm gonna do an updated 53-man roster projection here. I'm gonna work on that today. And we'll try to get that up at shawlocal.com as soon as possible. And then, like the defensive side is interesting too. You're right. Montez Sweat, DeMarcus Walker, Billings, Dexter, those are your starters. We probably won't see them. Zach Pickens suffered an injury in practice this week. He did not practice the last 2 days. So I don't know what his timeline is, but I don't expect to see him in this game. And, another guy, that defensive end spot is an interesting one to figure out because, you've got Austin Booker and Daniel Hardy who have played great, fantastic in the preseason. Do you reward that based off preseason reps? Do you have you seen the same thing in practice? You've also got a guy, Jacob Martin, who you went and signed in free agency, not for a lot of money. I think it's like $1 million deal and is essentially almost none of it's guaranteed. You could cut him easily, but he's been hurt all of training camp.
Yeah.
What do you do with that? I imagine they go with the healthy guys, of course, but that's something to think about. And then, you have Dominique Robinson, who's also still there. He looks stronger. He looks like he's been changing his body. Is that enough, though? Have you seen enough results? He made a really nice stop in the run game against Buffalo. But, we haven't seen him sack the quarterback. And at the end of the day, that's what you need your defensive ends to do.
Right.
I don't know how they're gonna figure that one out. Definitely, I'm still watching Hardy and Booker in the preseason. Like those are the guys to watch. I want to see if Booker gets another sack. I want to see if Daniel Hardy, who was on the practice squad last year, not a guy that a whole lot of people know. He's got 3.5 sacks in the preseason. I mean, that's a great story if he makes the team.
Yeah, and it'd be great, right? Like just to kind of see him, you kind of brought him in out of nowhere and you kind of, have kind of watched him develop over the whole training camp. That's exactly what you want to see, right? So you want to reward, those, hidden gems that you kind of get in there. It's just interesting to see, does that translate to the regular season? Does that translate to, playing against the ones all the time? Because I feel like we've seen some good stuff from the line in practices, right? Like we've seen some pretty good, pressures outside of, Montez Sweat and DeMarcus Walker. But at the same time, it goes back to that earlier conversation that we had about the offensive line and kind of different guys that have kind of stepped in and getting that inexperience. So is this you're getting rushes against an inexperienced line and you're getting rushes against usually 2s and 3s in these preseason games, or are you seeing something different? Obviously, Ryan Poles and his staff know football much better than we do and can see things much better than we do. But it'll be interesting to see, is that something that you kind of take, or is that something that you're kind of like, well, this is who they're doing it against. Maybe it's not as good as, you kind of see it when you watch it in game time.
Yeah, and that the film from the Bengals practice is going to be a big one too, because that's another opportunity where they get a lot of reps. A lot of reps against a number, the number ones on the other side. Rick chiming in here and asks who the punt returner is going to be. Yeah, that is a great question, Rick. We were out at practice the other day. I think it was on Tuesday, and our guy Kevin Fishbane over at The Athletic was doing an unofficial poll, and the votes from those of us watching practice in the media, they were all over the place. I mean, there were probably like 4 different guys who got votes, and then there were a couple of votes for not on the roster, and so like I don't know. I mean, my vote was Josh Blackwell because we've seen him. We saw him in the last preseason game doing that. Obviously, that would be something new for him, or at least at the NFL level. Like I don't think he has a punt return in a regular season game. I need to double check that, but you've got Blackwell, you've got, they've had Rome out there a lot in practice, but we haven't seen him do it in a preseason. Has he done it at all in the preseason, Michael? I don't think he has.
I don't remember him doing it.
I don't remember him catching one. You have Dante Pettis. If, you want to keep Dante Pettis on the roster, he's an option. You have DeAndre Carter, who's been a little bit banged up. So, yeah, I don't know. I honestly, this is the one position where I don't know who the punt returner is. Like, I could not tell you.
Yeah, I think it's kind of hard to tell, right? Mostly because you've seen a wide cast of guys do it, whether it's at practice or in games. It's not like you're bringing one guy in and, maybe that's just to, check all your, check everything out and make sure you know what you kind of have. And then once the regular season starts, you're going to have a consistent guy do it. But it is interesting because I do think it's kind of hard to tell who it's going to be. Maybe it's Blackwell. Could be. I don't think it's Rome. I don't think you
I don't think it is either.
You don't risk him. I don't think you risk that. You don't risk, especially, again, I feel like every time we talk, we presume that Keenan Allen is going to be injured this year. Obviously, don't want to wish him any injury, but it's an option. So you don't want to lose Rome Odunze to potentially, getting injured on a punt return when you have other guys who could potentially do it at the same level. A little bit better, maybe a little bit worse. But, yeah, I think I would probably put Blackwell in there, but I'm not entirely sure. Maybe that's a major thing. Maybe we'll learn today, is trying to see who they put out there and how they kind of perform.
Yeah, and my reasoning for Blackwell is I know that he's a guy who's going to make the team. They love him on special teams. They love him as the gunner. They love him, in some other areas. Well, why not just give him a shot back there with the ball in his hands? He's really fast. He's a fast dude.
Right.
And I know he's going to be on the team. And I'm not so sure if DeAndre Carter, and Dante Pettis are going to be on the team. Those we're still trying to figure out. Let's talk. Speaking of Dante Pettis, let's talk about the wide receiver stuff before we move on. You got DJ Moore, Keenan Allen, Rome Odunze. You got Tyler Scott. You have Velus Jones, maybe. I mean, you could put him under the running back spot. I think he's going to be on this roster. Maybe you disagree with me on that, Michael, but. And then, are you keeping Dante Pettis? Are you keeping Colin Johnson, who had a big Hall of Fame game? Who is the last wide receiver on this roster, Michael?
Well, I think you're including Velus Jones as a wide receiver. I don't think based on what you've seen, I think the experiment's been fun. And I know this feels like the number one question I feel like I get and I see a lot is Velus Jones going to make this roster? And I think if he does, it's going to be as a wide receiver. I think you've seen in the running back room. You've just seen that DeAndre Swift, Roschon Johnson, and Khalil Herbert. Those are your running backs. Those are your guys that you're going to use throughout the regular season. They have experience. They've been better than Velus Jones. Just based on what you've seen both in the past and in preseason. And I don't think you're gonna I don't think you list Velus Jones as a running back. So I think he kind of gets that wide receiver role. I see Rick's comment here, poor Colin Johnson. I kind of agree. I think he might be the odd man out in this scenario. Maybe it's Dante Pettis, but you're not getting rid of Tyler Scott. I still feel like this group, heading into his second year, has a lot of faith in him. They know that he has the speed. It's just about putting it all together with the routes and, being, doing it the right way as opposed to, kind of misplacing the ball and not being able to find it. So I do think probably it's either Pettis or Johnson. I think Jones makes the roster. I know that's going to be controversial. I know people are like, why are we sticking with Velus Jones here? But I think the Bears like him. I think they like him as a kickoff returner. I think Poles is really into keeping this guy, one of his top offensive, selections in his first year. And I think that means either Colin Johnson or Dante Pettis are probably out.
Yeah, I'm with you. I think Velus Jones makes this roster. I don't think it's I don't think it's that controversial. I think that they want him as a kick returner, and if he can play multiple positions on offense, he's not going to start at either of them,
Right.
which is unfortunate for him, but he's a versatile guy, and you're going to keep him around for that reason. I tend to lean toward they're going to keep Dante Pettis over Colin Johnson, which goes back to Rick's comment. I'll pull it up again. Poor Colin Johnson, because he can be a punt returner, because he's played with this team just a couple of years ago. He was, I'm not going to say he was like the most productive wide receiver ever, but he was serviceable when you needed him to be, which would suck for Colin Johnson. Hey, maybe Colin has a huge game tonight and that sort of changes our mind. But I think the plays you saw from Dante Pettis against the Bengals were, as impressive, if not more than what we saw from Colin Johnson in a Hall of Fame game. That's kind of where I'm leaning at that wide receiver spot as we look towards the deadline. I mean, it's Tuesday. Tuesday at 3:00 Chicago time is when they have to have this roster figured out. And that's coming up quick here. That's coming up real quick. Guys, if you have any other last questions, we got a few more minutes. We can chat with you here. Throw them in the comments. We'll stay on this topic. Rick says, how can you guys trust Velus? I'm not saying I do necessarily. Right. I'm saying that they do. I guess that's a question for Matt Eberflus, really. I mean, I'm with you. I understand why fans are kind of sick of it. You saw him bobble a kick return, in Buffalo. You've seen him with obviously everybody saw the fumbling issues at punt return 2 years ago when he was a rookie. Look, this is it. Like, I think they have nothing to lose in keeping him on the roster. And if he makes a couple of mistakes at this point, 3 years in, then it's time to move on.
Yeah. Yeah, I would agree with that. I think, fans might not like it, but at the end of the day, we're not the GM. Brian Poles is, and obviously he likes him. He sees something there. I don't know. I wouldn't go as far as saying, it's a stubborn, he's one of my first offensive picks. I need to make it see him work because, we've seen him kind of admit mistakes throughout, his GM, career here with the Bears and admitting when things didn't work out. But I think it's one of those things where it's just kind of like we got to give him one last opportunity because I think they see that the offensive talent is there, right? Like you see that he's a versatile player.
The speed.
Speed is there, and you can't just find speed. You can't just find that. And I think the thinking is we don't want to cut him. He goes to another team, figures it out, and then it looks like, why do we do this, right? Like it's hindsight's 2020. So I think it's one of those things where it's like you do every single possible thing to see whether this happens, and it's up to the player at this point, right? Are you going to make plays? Are you not going to fumble? Are you going to, find reasons to make this roster and to stay on this roster? And you got one last opportunity. I think, you've seen enough in training camp where I don't think he's taking a spot of someone toward the bottom that you're kind of like, whoa, like, how is this happening? Like, why are you doing this? I think he's played well enough. I don't think he's shined. I don't think he's done anything crazy, but he's done well enough to be like toward the bottom of the roster, and you have a spot for him and you give him one last opportunity to make it work.
He's exactly the type of guy who somebody would take a shot on waivers.
Without
like I don't think for a minute that he's going to get through waivers.
No.
Even though, that doesn't necessarily mean he's going to find success with another team. He's still the player that we've seen on tape. And so, I don't think they're ready to give up on that yet. Another comment from Rick, he says, when are you guys going to do your season win totals? Yeah, I think maybe next week we should do that, Michael. We're going to have the cuts on Tuesday. We'll probably join you guys late next week again, maybe Wednesday or Thursday, something like that. After the cut down deadline, we can talk about the roster and we can look ahead to the regular season. Finally, it seems like we've been in training camp mode forever, but maybe that's what we'll do with our it's kind of like an in-between week. There's no preseason games the weekend after. It's a Labor Day. It's a little bit of a rest for everybody. We can talk big picture. We can talk win totals. We can talk some NFC North too, and where this is all heading for all these teams.
Isn't that gap kind of weird to you? Like, why are we waiting like 17 days in between games? Like, if anything, like I feel like I know that was kind of what the argument of why some people wanted Caleb to play in this game, because then you have all this open time. And I know it's probably was agreed upon just to let guys recover if you had an injury and that kind of stuff during training camp. But it is interesting just to kind of see. I know we have technically there are still like practices next week that media is allowed to go to, but after that it's pretty much shut down, do whatever they want, and no one really knows what's going on at that point. So it's really interesting just to see the kind of long gap in between the end of the preseason and the regular season. I know fans hate it because they want to see games, they want the regular season to start, but I wonder how much players and maybe more organizations and players don't like it, because it kind of leaves an opportunity to kind of get stale. And that's kind of why you see those kind of inconsistent, games in September.
Yeah, we do see a lot of sloppiness the first couple of weeks of the season. And it is going to be a long layoff, especially when teams are not playing their starters in the final preseason game. It goes back to when they added the 17th game. They took away a preseason game, but they didn't. The season still starts the same week it always has, and so you have that dead week there in the middle. I kind of think it's a good thing to let guys rest. Also, like, I don't think anybody needs to be doing anything crazy on Labor Day weekend NFL wise. Like, let's just leave that open. Maybe that's just me personally liking a little bit of a break before we get going in week one. Anyway, though, we got to get going, guys. Thank you to everyone who joined us live. Once again, hit the thumbs up on YouTube. We'd really appreciate it. Like us and subscribe, Spotify, Apple, wherever you get your podcast. Leave us a review. Those are great ways to support the show. Head to shawlocal.com to read all of our work. And please consider subscribing. That is the number one best way to support us, to support the show. Subscribe at shawlocal.com. He's Michael Dwojak. You can find him on Twitter at mdwojak94. I'm Sean Hammond. I'm on Twitter at Sean_Hammond. You can follow Bears_Insider for all of our coverage. This has been the Shaw Local Bears Insider Podcast. Thank you, everybody, for listening. Enjoy the game tonight, Thursday night. Enjoy this what will probably be an ugly game with a lot of backups, but enjoy it anyway, and have a great weekend, everybody.